think so. Hello, can you guys hear me? Yes, these guys definitely can. And one of the things that I...
Riku, is that mic here?
No, this is mine, man. But this is my laptop. I'm definitely gonna need it. Let's just get me set up first. And yeah, I just want to say that I also lost the rock, paper, scissors match, and that's why I'm here. These guys as well. No, we don't need a sound. It's kind of funny standing here on the ledge and thinking that I'm probably gonna fall at some point, especially after these 3 beers.
Forward, or we move this back?
Let's move it back. Yep. Yes. And another thing, actually, we traveled to Costa Rica with this guy, Marcus, right here. And a cool thing that we saw when we flew there was that at Mexico airport, there was like those happy or not thingies, the machines there, which is quite cool, pretty amazing. I've also seen them in UK a couple of times actually, in Gatwick airport. So, must be an amazing company. But anyway, great to be here. It's such a weird thing standing here in front of all of you people, especially because I know that there's so many people that I already know from here, like, I don't know, people that I see as my own idols, and it's funny to be talking about anything. But for those guys who don't know me, I'm Riku. Originally from, well, I'm not gonna tell you because I have a picture guest there in a second slide, but I used to live here in Tampere for quite some time, but then I decided to move to London for a bit, just to play with the big guys, I guess. But now I'm back. Finally, I'm back. It's so great to be here again. And oh man, oh, that just warms my heart so much you don't even know. Anyway, I have a few they're kind of like holiday pics from London. I wanted to show you guys as the first thing, because it was such a great trip. For instance, here, London here at night time, of course. This is from the Silicon Roundabout. It's like the IT central of London. Which is quite cool. Our office is there as well, like somewhere. The Futurist office. I didn't mention that. Yeah, I work for Futurist. Also, the house that I used to live in. Such a British house. Such a great. I don't know. What would you call that? It wasn't all of it. It wasn't. The whole thing wasn't our house. Just to make it clear. It was just a small flat inside of it. It's freaking expensive to live in London. I actually used to live 40 minutes from the office, which was just a pain in the ass. And the last picture here. Does any one of you know from which Finnish city, which city in Finland that's taken from? Yes, that's an actual, amazing. How did you know? Nice, yeah, because I'm also from Rovaniemi. You can probably figure it out from my Finnish dialect if you come and talk to me later on. Anyway, I used to work for 2 different companies while being in London. The first one being this financial sector company, which was quite interesting. It was like completely different from anything I've experienced before. Like this is the office, and it's just a huge farm of resources, like all of you guys are from me as well. And the corporate culture was just something a bit different, something that after a year doing that, I kind of realized that maybe this is not the thing that I actually want to be doing. So I switched to working for another client, Plan International. I don't know if anyone of you have ever heard of it. They're like a non-profit company. What we are building now with them is a kind of like a vital event. I don't know if that says anything to you, but like if you are born, you have to be registered somewhere. And some of these developing countries don't have any systems for that. They are just, some people get born and like you are not registered anywhere, and what happens is that you can't really, for instance, get any education. You can't go to the police because they will just tell you that, hey, you are now a Bangladeshi citizen, so just fuck off. Anyway, these are some great pictures from South Africa. We have some team members there, and I was lucky enough to be able to travel there to see them, to have meetings with them, and see these amazing animals. And that's my colleague Ewan. He's from Scotland. He has weird accent. And it's really hard to understand what he says sometimes. But it's been amazing, amazing thing. Anyways, now I need to switch the mode of my keynote because I can't really see I can't see the next slide. What was the shortcut again? We kind of went through it yesterday. Sorry, this is my first time ever giving a presentation. Maybe some technical support would be. See? Oh, now I know. Not that screen. No, you didn't see anything. It might be that this is now a mirrored display, if you know the term. It's an OS X term, but let me just. All right. I got it. I made it this far. You can see my code there as well. It's pretty crappy. Don't look at it. All right, here we go. And one other thing that my dear colleague and my friend Antti Mattila, he's not here unfortunately, but I promised to tell everyone that we're doing this amazing, it says amazing podcast here with amazing hosts, and yeah, it's such a cool thing. We've done 13 episodes so far. The latest one was about TypeScript. And I don't know, how many of you have ever heard about this? Nice. Almost, like, I don't know, half, well, not everyone, but half of the people. I don't want to overestimate here, but yeah, if you don't know about this, then it's webdevaus.fi. It's in Finnish, unfortunately. We are thinking of doing an English episode at some point, but we'll have to see. But a couple of questions first. Just so I also get to know you guys. I don't know what's the time limit, 30 minutes? Yeah. Just let me know. All right, shit. All right, thanks a lot, guys. It's a pleasure being here. Anyway, but how many of you are not developers? Are not developers? Cool. How many of you are designers? Nice one. There's at least 4 of you guys, and this presentation will change everything for you as well. I'm not showing any code or anything. This is just a paradigm shifting thing that I'm going to tell you about. But when I was working on these 2 different projects, the corporate one and the cool one, we ended up creating our own style guides and UI component libraries. That was also the title of the presentation, if I remember correctly. I just kind of gave it out. But can someone explain what's a component library? Does anyone have a clue? Can someone just you have to have the same explanation as I do, because the presentation would otherwise be kind of I don't know, awkward, I guess. Just shout something. What is a component UI library? Component UI library. UI component library, that's what it actually is, I guess.
Pretty self-explanatory.
So what does it mean? Do you have an example of that?
Library of components.
It surely is that, yeah, you're absolutely right. Do you have an example?
A button.
A button?
Yeah, your button is my button.
Yeah. So all right, we can talk about that a bit later on. Right? Yeah, but like Bootstrap, for instance. You probably know Bootstrap, or what else? Can't remember, man. Bootstrap is pretty much the only one I use.
How about Material.io?
Oh yeah, Material.io. It's also it's a cool thing about it is that it's also kind of like a design pattern library, I guess. But yeah, like I said, we built 2 of these, and at least it changed the way I'm thinking about building software. In the first project, in the financial company project, I'm just trying not to say the name of the company because it's like so like built into me that I'm almost saying it out loud. But the first one that we built was pretty much a yep. Actually, this is what happened to the software as well. It's searching. All right. I think you figured it out. All right, here we go. It was a bit of a nightmare. We didn't really have a clue of what we're doing, and we didn't have any experience of like building component libraries like this. So it was kind of like, I don't know if it's an English term, like a cowboy way of doing things. So just like an ad hoc way of doing things. And it turned out to be a bit of a mess. And I don't know if you're recording these talks, but like if someone from my team is watching this, then I'm just gonna say that it's an amazing piece of software. Don't listen to me. We actually made huge progress. We had like the financial company wanted to rebuild their whole core platform, both the private side and the corporate side. It was kind of like a currency exchange platform, kind of like TransferWise, if you guys have heard of it. It's kind of like that. But now, when I then started working on the new project, I decided to build another one. Build the best one, best UI component library ever, build the best style sheet ever. It's like the Lamborghini of UI component library. It's pretty much the coolest thing that you can ever come across. But that's just my opinion, I guess. And I already told you about the project that we are building it for, but it's, a birth, death, marriage registration platform. I can tell you about it a bit later on. We actually need people to be working on this. It's an open source project and hopefully a successful one. We just have to see. But I guess like what I'm what I'm trying to say here is that building a component library first instead of just getting a bunch of views from a designer is actually a great thing. It kind of changes the whole way we build software. It's not just like that here are the views, you just implement them, and what ends up happening is that you build a lot of duplicate components, and some components are like almost the same design-wise as well, but there are like small differences everywhere. And if you would build these component libraries first, or the component library first, it would also force the designer to think about like what are the pieces of logic, what are the pieces of UI that are repeated all around the UI, and that would kind of give some kind of coherence to all of what we are building. Anyone wants to ask a question so far? Yes. Yeah, go ahead, dude.
There's a microphone. So if you start with designing all the whoa, it's too much. Yes. So if you start with designing how things should look and work, and not first the views, if I got it right, so you will come across like, oh, but we do need a date time picker too, instead of in addition to the date picker and so on. So how do you handle these problems? I think the one I just said was quite elementary, but harder ones.
It's an excellent question. So if I understood correctly, like if you have a date picker and you need a time picker as well, would they be in any way similar? I would just say that you add them both to the component library and they can be different components, if that answers your question at all.
Yeah, I think I try to ask like, if you try to first build something and this is how it should look and work like, and then you start implementing the actual views and you have to go quite many times back to the drawing board, right? Is it like a problem at all?
Maybe now. I didn't understand the first time, but hopefully I don't understand now. But no, I don't think it is. Like, of course, you can end up building loads of components that don't make sense in the eventual app or whatever you're building. But I guess that's just part of the process. Like coding, programming in general, you end up coding a lot of code that doesn't really make sense in the end. I guess like a thing that I always love to repeat is that refactoring is in the essence of all of this. But yeah, that's a great question. Let me think about that a bit more and I'll come back to you. Yeah, that's another one.
Mike here.
Yeah, regarding the that you said you started building the component library, which changed the design and working with the design completely. Did you have a designer working with you when you were building the library? Because that kind of changes the thing as well.
I can start skipping through my slides because I'll eventually come there. I'll promise you. This is actually my next slide, the Hitachi logo. He's one of the sponsors of this. They actually pay for all my clothing. But yeah, yeah, we did have a designer. I have to. It's not easy to say, but we did have a designer. But I promise to come back to that later. I have a bunch of slides to still go. But I guess I have like key findings from all of this that we found that really helped us in the second project. Some of the things that we kind of missed when we did the first one, and I've now just listed them, all of them here. So let's get to it. So the first one being like you really need a component library. It's not like you can just decide that, hey, I don't believe anything this guy is saying. You actually need it. Or at least we did, which is kind of, yeah. Because we need it because in the financial sector company project that we did, we had a system where we had a login app, we had a register app, and we had the dashboard app. They were like in a completely different repositories, and in an ideal world you could even have different teams looking over them. And what we wanted to, what the question was that how do we share components? We have the same kind of buttons in all of these apps, so what will we do to share components between these different apps? And the component library thinking was actually one of the solutions that we found. And in a sense, it makes sense, like, because I don't know, probably most of you use something like React or some other like component-based way of building UIs these days. So why not think about the design from a component perspective as well? It would be weird to build stuff with a component mindset, but then design stuff from the view mindset, right? And we found that the building a component library really helps with like designer and developer collaboration as well. Like you see in this picture, this is actually two of the designers from our company and me there at the back. Like they're telling me that, hey, Riku, this button is just, it's not like this. It shouldn't be like this at all. This is actually, it's a real picture. This is how things are in London. It's like you've seen these stock photos everywhere, but like it's different in Finland. That's why I'm laughing. But yeah, it makes it much easier to work with designers because you get constant feedback from the designer that, hey, you have the style guide and hopefully it's hosted somewhere so they can access it as well. you have the style guide somewhere, and they can always go there, point out things like, hey, that button has a different shade of blue that we intended to have, and they can just come back to you. And in a sense, like, it's better to realize those things, to find those things before the thing is in production. Because when you get a software deployed to production and then you notice that, yeah, man, the button should be red, but it's blue, the whole loop that you have to go back, the whole churn, you have to go back all the way to the end. You have to fix the bug, you have to put it to the QA process, you have to schedule a release date if you are working for a corporate or enterprise company, and then you have to release it, and it's such a pain in the ass. Another thing, this actually probably answers your question, is that it's good to have just one source of truth. And in our case, we decided that fucking hell. Yeah, it is indeed. That was a good one. That was a good one. Just doing it. Maybe I'll just hold it here. Then I don't have my hands available. Anyway, we decided that we'll go with just a sketch file. The designers can just build a sketch file and build the component library there and structure the component library there. And we'll just take the sketch file and we build the actual implementation based on this. And I know that like Sketch, for instance, is not the best tool for like sharing designs, and because what we did was that they just send us the sketch files all over again. But we've found that it still helps, that it's just the designs are coming from somewhere, hopefully from the designers, and then we can just implement them. They see the designs in the component library or the style guide, and then they can give feedback about that. And there's this cool tool that I just heard about a couple of days ago called Framer X. It's kind of like Sketch, but instead of just creating SVGs, you can export them to React components, which is quite cool. I kind of think that it might be a bit of a pipe dream that would actually work in a real project, because components tend to be quite complicated, but still, like, I like the idea a lot of designers making the most fundamental, the smallest pieces of logic that we have, and then we can be just the builders that create the actual application logic on top of those. That would be cool. Next thing, a component library is not a small thing to do. It's actually quite life-changing in a way. Because if you think about it, for me it was. If you think about it, like, if you're maintaining hundreds of different components, and if you want to do it well, it's almost like maintaining hundreds of different NPM modules or any like open source modules. You have to maintain them, you have to document them, you have to encapsulate them quite well, you have to actually define what the button component is and why it is like it is. There has to be some logic behind it. And of course, like, there's a question of who will be the audience of your component library, because of course it's different if you are creating an open source component library, and if you are creating a component library just for your team or just for your project. Of course, that kind of changes the game a lot, because if you only build it for your project, you can have like all sorts of domain-specific components there. For instance, like a currency exchange module or whatever. It doesn't have to be so generic that anyone could use it. But I think the benefits are just so great that that's why I would still be doing this in the future as well. Like, for instance, if you build a project without a component library, how will you know that you are not duplicating a component? Because you don't have an index of any you don't have an index of like all the components that you could just look to when you are thinking of building a new one. Maybe it exists already. You don't have to build another one. And loads of big companies are doing this, kind of like approaching the problem this way as well. Like Alibaba, for instance, is using AndDesign, and well, they are of course also maintaining this open source library, which makes it it makes it so much difficult for them. But it's a great thing that they are doing it. And maybe a bit more technical thing that we found was that monorepo. I'm sure at least some of you guys are familiar with it, but like the idea of just having all the projects, all the sub-projects of your project in just one repository actually worked quite well in our case, especially from the point of view of versioning. Because what we found is that if you are building the app and you want to use a button and you notice that, hey, this button doesn't take in an ID attribute for some reason because someone just made a mistake when they built it to the component library, then you would always have to go back to the component library, make the bug fix there, make a PR from that, get that PR reviewed, get that review into the master, release another version, and then use that new version in your app. So that's such a big amount of work for just fixing a small bug. So if you're just using a monorepo approach, you kind of omit all of that, I guess. And a cool thing that I read about a couple of months ago, I read about how Google is structuring their projects in version control. And I don't know, I have no idea if this is true or not. I just read it from Reddit, I guess, or something. But the thing was that like Google is using a monorepo for all of their projects. And whenever someone makes a change to a library that many other projects are using, they are also responsible of updating the other projects, which makes sense because they have the freshest knowledge of how things should work. And if you, the opposite would be that someone else notices that, hey, we are using this library and it has like 2 major versions, fresher version that we are using, and now we have to figure out what changed. This is our project, our OpenCRVS. It's not live yet, it's not open source. I kind of lied when I told you that it was. But it's the main idea is still the same. We have all the sub-projects in just one repo, and it works quite well. We really like it. And yeah, this presentation is coming to the end, so don't worry. I don't know. I have no idea how much time I still have left. But a thing that I really wanted to mention was that types, just typing the code, like using TypeScript or using, I don't even want to say that this should be just like web specific, but just having some kind of types in your code with component libraries actually helps a lot. Because you can just, like, if you make a change to the component library, you should be able to just see that, like, which projects now also need to be updated because there was an error. You're missing a property or you're using a component in a wrong way or something like that. Helps a lot. And like, even though you have types, you still have to have tests. I always find myself talking about this actually, but like you still have to have tests for your projects. And going back to the monorepo thing, it's cool that like one of the coolest things about the Google monorepo was that when you have all of the projects in just one repository, you can just run the tests with one command to all of the different projects. You make a change, you run all of the tests at once, and you see that everything's still working, which is quite amazing, at least in my opinion. And the last thing that I want to mention, if you want to build a component library, just don't overdo it. It doesn't make any sense to start building like buttons and stuff like that yourself. There are plenty of component libraries like Bootstrap or whatever you want to use that you can use as the basis for your own component library. And in a sense, you can just, in your own component library, you can take the Bootstrap button, you can style it any way you want, but still you have the same, like the interactions and all that thing coming from someone else's code, which makes the component library of yours a bit more I don't know, slimmer, I guess. You don't have that much to maintain. Also, sometimes it's better to duplicate code. I don't know, the try principle, we've been thinking about it a lot recently. Try principle it's a real thing, but like with these components, I guess like what comes to styling and all of that, it's all right to sometimes duplicate code. If you have two different kinds of buttons, you don't have to inherit them from just one button class and then have a huge hierarchy of components just inheriting from each other. You can just, I don't know, copy and paste code, or yeah, that's what I want to say. Like, don't care about any good practices at all. Thanks. I'm out.
All right, Riku, don't go away yet. So first of all, two things I see happen to you in London. One is you got that funny accent, and we're going to fix that. And the other thing is you lost like your total Finnish sense of time, because I'm afraid that's the only presentation for today. I'm sorry to the other presenters, but that was like all our time. But no, the important thing is that Leo, you should really present this because this is like your labor of love. But Leo is a home brewer, and he's a very talented one. And we have very special presents just for the presenters. You get the Web Dev Sausages Cherry Wood Smoked Dark Ale. It's a limited edition, very limited beer. Save it for a special occasion. Moreover, you get the Happy or Not swag bag, which has all kinds of cool stuff in it. I'm not going to unwrap and show everything, but I've seen there's some cool stuff in there. So, thank you. Okay. Whew. All right.